just a heads up. I will be talking about good players here, okay? Don't go down to the comment section and scream, oh my God, this clown thinks Justin Jefferson's not good. Of course I do. I'm going to be talking about players that you can actually sell for a considerable amount of value that are very good. There are just other options in their respective range that I would rather have. Now let's recap who we talked about last week before we get into the options for this week. Starting off, Raheem Mostert. Probably no longer a sell, right? I mean, Devon Achane officially back in. I mean, based off what I've seen in the live streams as of late, it does seem like Raheem Mostert's value this week is significantly lower than it was last week, the week before. I mean, when we had been saying to sell him high. Ramondre Stevenson was a running back that we were looking to sell high after a phenomenal game against Washington, essentially looking at the offense, looking at the committee type role, saying, yeah, I want nothing to do with this. Ramondre flames out this past week. I mean, he's still someone that you're starting every week as a receiver, but in reality, probably not going to be able to sell him for anything. You probably missed your window last week. Jacobs, another running back that I actually drafted a ton of, but the issue is this is a running back that's in a pretty bad offense. That's not really getting involved as a receiver. Now, I will say Jacobs may be someone that we can still sell if you can pivot off and maybe include Josh Jacobs and a wide receiver such as Amari Cooper, who was that other guy we were saying to sell high last week. And if you could pivot over to maybe a top 5-ish running back, go get like Jonathan Taylor, I think that would make a lot of sense. But yeah, Amari, we were talking about selling him high last week. This week, probably much tougher, especially with Deshaun Watson being out rest of year. Nico Collins will be our next guy that we are talking about selling high. The reason being is if you are looking at the involvement from Tank Dell in this Houston Texans offense, Tank Dell was kind of taken over as the wide receiver one based off the target volume. Nico Collins, while he's been productive when healthy, he's still a wide receiver averaging only about 5 targets per game. So we're saying, okay, if we can get out of here, probably want to and pivot over to another option that we're a little more comfortable with the target volume. Saquon Barkley was that next player we were saying to sell high. We were saying pivot to Jonathan Taylor, add a piece, try to go get to Austin Eckler. I mean, maybe you can still sell Barkley high, depending on the league that you're in. You probably missed the boat. Jordan Addison, we were saying to sell high in preparation to get Jefferson back in. I still don't think the passing volume is going to be great in Minnesota. From what I've seen with the rankings on flogfantasy.com, Addison's already fallen a considerable amount. Probably can't sell him anymore. And then Rachaad White was that last guy, and we will talk about Rachaad White in this video. Might as well kick it off with Rachaad White, right? Because this is a running back that has had 2 phenomenal back-to-back weeks. Rachaad White goes out there, and 2 weeks ago against Houston, in a game where the Tampa Bay Buccaneers scored 37 points, he gets you 20 carries. He has 4 receptions out of the backfield, about the best workload you could possibly find. He goes over 100 total yards and multiple touchdowns. You look at this past week against the Tennessee Titans, Rachaad White, yet again, another game with 20 carries. That's beautiful. You love to see it. He also gets you the receiving touchdown out of this backfield as well. And I want to reiterate what we said was with Rachaad White, which remains true this week. Full BBR format, probably not someone that we're looking to sell high, to be honest. I mean, full BBR league, you probably are standing by the fact that he is just going to consistently get 3 to 4 receptions every single week out of this backfield. I mean, the craziest thing ever, and we looked at this last week, is he's had 37 targets this season, and he's had 35 receptions. 35 receptions off of 37 targets. Full BBR format, Rachaad White's your guy based off the receiving involvement. However, if you're playing in that half PPR league, if you're playing in that non-PPR league where the receiving upside doesn't matter nearly as much, this is still going to be a player that I'm pivoting off of based off the fact that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, while they've been great over the past 2 weeks, aren't going to be an offense that continues to have a significant amount of trips to the red zone, right? I mean, if you're looking at 2 weeks ago, yeah, they scored 37. This past week against Tennessee, the reason you get 20 carries here is the Tennessee Titans offense puts up 6 points, so it's not even a real football game. I think you have this offense coming back down to earth. If you're looking at the community rankings over on flogfantasy.com, reminder, I don't make these rankings. These are made from all of y'all going through and interacting with the site and giving us those data points. Tony Pollard is currently behind Rachaad White. I view both running backs in a very similar light. Both running backs have the guaranteed role as a receiver. Both running backs are inefficient rushers. The difference between the two is I believe that Tony Pollard is in a better offense going forward. And while he has not been this guy scoring touchdowns, I think that may change in the future. So I know it sounds crazy, but if I'm playing in a half PPR, non-PPR format, I'm going to go Pollard over Rachaad White at this point. And I want to reiterate, guys, I drafted literally 0 Tony Pollard. Let me pull this up to show you how little Tony Pollard I drafted. It's not like I'm trying to cover my bags here by any means, telling y'all to go through and make these trades. I'm trying to be as objective as I can about this. I have Tony Pollard in 5% of my leagues on Underdog. 5%. Now, moving this over to our next guy. Yeah, let's go ahead. Let's stick it at the running back position and look at Kenneth Walker. Now, Kenneth Walker is almost the exact opposite of what you would have with Rachaad White. If you're looking at Walker, this is a running back that if you're playing in a non-PPR format, you hold him, ladies and gentlemen. Non-PPR league, he is your guy. He is officially the first and second down back in Seattle, and that's it. We have yet another week where Zach Charbonnet leads this team in snaps. But, I mean, you have Kenneth Walker kind of as like the Derrick Henry, whereas you have Zach Charbonnet as the Tajee Spears, right? Where even if Charbonnet is seeing the majority of these snaps, Kenneth Walker will still be seeing the majority of the touches in this backfield. However, the issue that you have with this is Zach Charbonnet continues to see every single snap on third down and every single snap in the 2-minute drill. Kenneth Walker is getting legitimately 0 of those, ladies and gentlemen. While this past week, Kenneth Walker does get you 64 receiving yards and that receiving touchdown. Ultimately, if you're looking at the underlying receiving volume, since we had Zach Charbonnet really come on over the past 3 weeks, Charbonnet's had every snap on third downs. You've had Kenneth Walker with 1 reception, and 1 reception. We were planning on starting him against Washington, knowing it was a great matchup that Ramondre Stevenson had just excelled in. And then after that matchup, we are going to be pivoting off of him in that full PPR league where he's simply not giving you the receiving usage. If we're looking at where he's valued alongside other players in the community rankings, like I said, this is how y'all are valuing him, not how my rankings are. You can just hit add creator, add Mason Dodd if you want to see my rankings on flogfantasy.com. Here you have Kenneth Walker alongside Joe Burrow, Joe Mixon, Puka, Devonta Smith. I would rather have Joe Mixon over Kenneth Walker because Joe Mixon should be in a much better offense going forward and should have a larger role on third down. Now let's go over to our next guy here in Mike Evans. And with Mike Evans, absolutely dominant this season. I mean, it doesn't matter what you are looking at. You have 70 targets, over 700 receiving yards, and 6 receiving touchdowns. You got death, taxes, and Mike Evans hitting 1,000 receiving yards every single season. It is a guarantee. And Evans is now coming off a game where he just had 143 receiving yards off of 10 targets and the receiving touchdown in a beautiful matchup against the Tennessee Titans. Now, my hesitation here with Mike Evans is if you look at the target volume outside of this past week, typically Chris Godwin projects to see more volume in this offense than Evans from a week-to-week perspective. Now, of course, I'm not saying you want Chris Godwin over Mike Evans. You can look at my rankings. I have Evans over Godwin. But the point of this is these guys should be relatively close, but the difference in value is striking. Right now on flogfantasy.com, people are valuing Mike Evans ahead of Jalen Waddle. While I understand, Jalen Waddle obviously has Tyreek Hill that he has to go through and compete with a little bit better than Chris Godwin. Still, fundamentally, at the end of the day, I would rather have that piece that's sharing that wide receiver role in Miami with how good this offense projects to be from a week-to-week perspective in comparison to what we have in Tampa, where I'm a little more hesitant. I mean, even if we're just looking at the projection that you have on Underdog right now for Mike Evans, Evans is at 54.5 receiving yards this week in comparison to Chris Godwin at 52.5. So even if you look at the projections from a week-to-week perspective, these guys do look incredibly close on Underdog as well. And if you were saying, Mason, you're an idiot, obviously Mike Evans can have more than 54.5 receiving yards. You can find that on Underdog Fantasy. Promo code FLOCK, 100% deposit match, plus our rest of season fantasy football rankings and tiers. And a Joe Burrow special pick'em, more than less than half a total yard for this Thursday night game as well, ladies and gentlemen. I will warn you, though, Evans does have a very tough matchup going up against San Fran. Now, let's move this over to Justin Jefferson and have a million people scream at me like there's no tomorrow. With Justin Jefferson, obviously, he is right up there alongside Tyreek Hill as the best wide receiver in the NFL. He is young. He is a stud. And if you look at what you had through the first month of this season, 150 receiving yards, 159 receiving yards, 149 receiving yards. The last week against Carolina, only 85, but he gets you 2 receiving touchdowns. Like, Justin Jefferson was someone that you could pencil in and week out to be right alongside Tyreek Hill as the wide receiver 1. However, while I am rooting for Joshua Dobbs, and I believe that Joshua Dobbs is a great fantasy option in his own right because he is surrounded by these elite level weapons and the fact that Dobbs has rushing upside. If I'm going to be realistic here, Justin Jefferson's now coming into a situation where there is not nearly as much passing volume to go around as there was with Cousins. If you add on where Justin Jefferson currently is being valued, he is right ahead of Amon-Ra St. Brown. He is right ahead of Stephon Diggs. So if I'm looking at Jefferson versus Amon-Ra St. Brown, I am looking at 2 wide receivers that both are incredible young talents. Obviously, Jefferson's the better talent, but Amon-Ra St. Brown is in the much better offense. Amon-Ra St. Brown is 100% healthy where we don't have to worry about anything. And on top of that, Amon-Ra St. Brown has already gone through his bye week. Y'all know at this time of the year, this is about when we really need to be taking into consideration the players that have gone through bye versus the guys that haven't. I mean, that's why we were talking about Travis Etienne as that sell high guy a few weeks back. Even if he was one of my most drafted guys this season, we are saying, okay, he's definitely a top 5 running back. But ultimately, if you're sitting there and you can pivot to a top 3 guy that's already through his bye, you're going to get so much more production. If you look at the amount of games left this season, you have 4 games until the playoffs. If Jefferson's on bye for one of those, you get him for 75% of that time. Whereas Amon-Ra St. Brown, you get for 100% of that time. Pretty big delta between the two. So give me St. Brown with the extra game in comparison to Justin Jefferson. Now let's go over and look at what we have with Amari now. I took this screenshot and I made this list right before the Deshaun Watson news. Amari Cooper was at 61 in the Flock Fantasy Community rankings. Now, if I'm going to, let me pull this up and see where he is currently, see if we can still call him a sell high guy. Coming off a week with 98 receiving yards. I mean, the week prior, 139 receiving yards and the receiving touchdown. I actually drafted a ton of Amari Cooper. So, I mean, this is just absolutely brutal news for my own teams. Now, I guess we can just talk about what the impact of no Deshaun Watson's going to mean here. Amari Cooper has fallen a considerable amount. He's fallen down to 68 at the time of this recording. I'd imagine he probably continues to fall. But nonetheless, if you are looking at this offense with no Deshaun Watson, this goes from being a bad passing offense to a horrendous passing offense. This goes from a team that is trying to win by playing good defense and running the football to a team that is sending up a prayer that their defense can win them football games, and that's about it. It's going to be a bad offense. The bottom is about to fall out. And I don't know. I would rather just get out of it where we can. If we get anything similar to what we had previously with this backup quarterback. Now, someone that I keep on calling a sell high candidate, and he keeps on going out there and crushing it, is George Kittle. And you better believe he is yet again a sell high candidate here, ladies and gentlemen. I am loving this production because I drafted a lot of them, but I'm going to be very realistic. It can't keep up. If you are looking at George Kittle and breaking his games down over the past 3 seasons, with and without Deebo Samuel, there is a striking difference. George Kittle averages about double the amount of points with no Deebo Samuel than he does with Deebo Samuel. And while, yeah, Deebo Samuel was in this week and George Kittle still has a great game and everybody is excited, if you look at the underlying volume, ladies and gentlemen, you have 4 targets going to George Kittle this past week. Now, because George Kittle is George Kittle and he's going to do George Kittle things, he gets you 116 receiving yards as well as the receiving touchdown, and you're pumped about it. The thing is, from a realistic perspective, Kittle can't keep up this type of production with this drop in volume. So guys that I'd be looking to sell George Kittle for, if I could pivot over to Sam Laporta, if I could pivot over to Dalton Kincaid, I would love to do that. And this coming from someone who drafted way more George Kittle than those rookie tight ends. But I think that's all I have for you in this video. Please go to the comment section and let me know how much of an idiot I am and how much smarter you are. I would love to hear it. But thank you again. I really do appreciate you, ladies and gentlemen. And yeah, I will be live after the game tonight, of course, answering everybody's questions as we are live every single night. Thank you again. I appreciate you and really hope you have a great day.